This essay example, as well as thousands of others, is available in text format on our website for free and without registration. Simply Google Ivy Panda Free Essays.
Never Marry a Mexican, Theme Analysis and Summary. Sandra Cisneros' women reflect the Mexican immigrants' struggle to assimilate the parts of themselves that negative cultural stereotypes have taught them to hate. Never Marry a Mexican analysis shall be provided in this paper. How it began. In 1954, author Sandra Cisneros was born in a low-income family of 7 children, based in Chicago, Illinois. Her mother was Mexican-American, and her father, a full Mexican. Cisneros grew up the only girl among 6 brothers and has described this experience as being similar to having 7 fathers. As a child, Cisneros was shuttled back and forth between a sequence of dingy apartments in Chicago and her grandmother's homestead located in Mexico City. This experience, the concept of home or the lack of one, tends to factor continually in Sandra Cisneros' works of fiction in line with negative Mexican stereotypes. Sandra Cisneros' biography contains information about her environment that greatly influenced her works later on. The combined effect of a nomadic lifestyle, plus the social isolation of a constantly revolving cycle of friends, schools, her brother's unwillingness to let a girl join in their play naturally turned the young Cisneros to an inner life populated by books. It was this solitary reflective time that generated Cisneros' observant, creative voice. In 1974, Cisneros took a creative writing class in Chicago at the Loyola University campus, where she later completed her Bachelor of Arts undergraduate degree in English. She then went on to the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop and got a Master of Fine Arts degree, followed by the 1991 publication of short stories, including Never Marry a Mexican, in Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories collection, that is the subject of this review. Sandra Cisneros, Never Marry a Mexican, History of Creation. When Random House accepted Cisneros' second book of short fiction, Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories, for publication, this represented the first work by and about Chicanas, that is, Mexican-American women, to receive a contract with a major publishing house. Sandra Cisneros has also received numerous writing awards for her fiction, including the Before Columbus American Book Award and the Penn Center West Award for The House on Mango Street, a collection of short stories. Cisneros also received 2 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship for Creative Writers, a Dobie Pisano Fellowship, and a MacArthur Fellowship. Her anthology of poems, Loose Woman, achieved recognition and won the Mountain and Plains Booksellers Award a year after the publication date. Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories, according to Cisneros, contains a single, unifying thread of vision and experience that runs throughout the collection of 22 narratives. This vision provides a decidedly female perspective on sex, culture, and racism. Woman Hollering Creek features Mexican-American female characters, such as La Malinche, that all live in or near the border town of San Antonio, Texas. On the whole, the stories, Never Marry a Mexican and Bien Pretty in particular, concern women of divided loyalty. They have successfully assimilated into American culture, yet feel an oblique longing for their home country of Mexico. Cisneros' women exist in an in-between state. The third section of the book is the largest and investigates the trials and tribulations of adult Hispanic females attempting to find their place amid familial and cultural pressures as well as traditional gender roles. Long way to the insight. The protagonist of the title story is Cleofilas, a Mexican bride, unfortunately, wed to a brutish and violent man who lives over the border in Texas. Cleofilas, a soap opera addict, pines away fantasizing about the passion she witnesses in the television soap opera she and her girlfriends watch, and understands her fantasy has finally been fulfilled with the arrival of Juan Pedro, who wishes to marry immediately without a long engagement, since he can't take off too much time from work. Juan Pedro sweeps Cleofilas away to the border town of Seguin, Texas, a town built so that you have to depend on husbands. Cleofilas still understands her life in terms of the soap opera fantasy, only now the episodes got sadder and sadder. And there were no commercials in between for comic relief. When Cleofilas finally escapes the marriage after countless beatings, Juan Pedro's unmitigated unfaithfulness, and disgraceful treatment, she goes back to her father's house in Mexico. Here she exchanges one domineering male force for another, her father. In the climax scene, on her way back to her father's home, however, Cleofilas catches a faint glimmer of what it is to be a free woman, beholden to none. When they travel across the woman hollering creek and her female driver lets out a bellow that makes her and her son jump. Never marry a Mexican. Summary. The author's experience growing up in a house full of men appears to have colored her opinion of them. The men in Woman Hollering Creek and other stories are all of a certain ilk: brutal, overbearing, insensitive, riddled with machismo, highly sexual and incapable of marital fidelity. The use of sex to soothe, control, and escape is a common theme that runs throughout the collection and finds its home in the piece of literature Never Marry a Mexican, which concerns a young Hispanic woman named Clemencia. As a protagonist, Clemencia is simultaneously entertaining and disturbing, a union of opposites. She spurns marriage and men and says, "I'll never marry. Not any man. I've known men too intimately. I've witnessed their infidelities, and I've helped them to it. Unzipped and unhooked in clandestine maneuvers. I've been accomplice, committed premeditated crimes. I'm guilty of having caused deliberate pain to other women. I'm vindictive and cruel, and I'm capable of anything." Cisneros appears to be aware of it and in essence encourages Clemencia's sexual autonomy. Yet, the action of the story tells the reader that Cisneros views the power as somewhat cheap, in that it rises from a misuse of sexuality and is a dangerous result of women recapitulating the mistakes of men. Clemencia expresses nothing more than contempt for her American boyfriend, though the reader senses that her negative feelings are fueled by her emerging sense of inadequacy and guilt resulting from her inability to speak Spanish. Negative Mexican stereotypes and consequences. Like many of Women in Woman Hollering Creek and other stories, Clemencia personifies the Mexican-American quandary, the cultural no-man's land afforded Chicanas who must confront daily the triple bind of not being considered Mexican, not being considered American, and not being male. In Clemencia's case, though her voice appears rebellious, her actions are ultimately self-destructive. Never marry a Mexican. Irony refers to some advice Clemencia received from her mother when she was a young girl. Her mother openly regretted marrying her father, and her attempt to shield her daughter from her own mistakes ultimately consigned Clemencia to cultural and social marginality. Clemencia refuses to date the low-income Latinos she comes into contact with in her daily life, preferring the companionship of married white men. Ironically, the white men whom she has sex with received the same advice from their mothers: they will gladly bed a Mexican-American woman clandestinely, behind closed doors. Still, they will never legitimize their relationship by marrying her, for the simple fact that a wife must be of the same race. Clemencia does allow herself to fall into a relationship after relationship with unavailable men, always married and always white. Never marry a Mexican. Analysis. One of the Never Marry a Mexican themes stated is negative Mexican stereotypes and their influence on heroines' relationships. Her choice in men betrays the lack of self-worth at her core. Sandwiched between two cultures, neither of which will claim her, Clemencia turns resentful. Like the males she despises and yet envies, Clemencia takes lovers easily and leaves them quickly. She uses sex as power, as a weapon. She goes to bed with a man while his wife is giving birth to their child and then, years later, sleeps with that same child. Her sexual conquests, like those of her stereotypical Don Juan counterparts, are attempts at control. She wants dominion over her lovers without giving up any of her own authority. As a protagonist, Clemencia's struggle to find happiness, peace, and love hits home. It registers the loneliness and isolation that echoes Cisneros experienced growing up between homes, between cultures, and endlessly rejected by men. Though Clemencia boasts that she is happily free and unattached, her pain and loneliness are palpable. She exacts a bizarre form of revenge on a married lover when she sleeps with his son. For Clemencia, the sexual relationship with the younger generation links her to his father and mother's marital relations, of which he is the product, and her lover's relative youth allows her to mother him. The disturbing logic driving the relationship simultaneously defames and yet honors what Clemencia denies herself: marriage and motherhood. Misinterpreting sexual power as personal power, Clemencia justifies her existence thus: human beings pass me on the street, and I want to reach out and strum them, as if they were guitars. Sometimes all humanity strikes me as lovely. But Clemencia's world is formed around an emptiness, a vacant space she can never quite fill, and she believes all others must share this vacancy. Guitars make music only because they are hollow. Via this delusional and tragic woman, Cisneros uses the behavior of men as a catalyst that propels her women into a search deep within themselves for the love that men have failed to give them. Critics' assessments. According to Rosenfeld's 2002 study Measures of Assimilation in the Marriage Market, Mexican Americans 1970 to 1990, Mexican immigrants have extremely high levels of national origin endogamy, as do immigrants from most other parts of the world, but Mexican immigrants also face substantial social barriers in their interactions with native whites. Mexican immigrants are far from generalized assimilation or specific assimilation with any native group. In their reviews, critics such as Palmisano have named some of the main themes of Woman Hollering Creek as poverty and cultural suppression, the search for self-identity, and the role of women in Mexican-American culture. Other critics such as Fitz claim that Cisneros' characters engage in a continual process of cultural mediation as they struggle to reconcile their Mexican past with their American present. Similarly, Wyatt understands that Cisneros' women traverse the ambiguous space between cultures and that, in Never Marry a Mexican short story, Cisneros complicates the notion of subverting feminine gender roles by borrowing from masculinity. Silverstein and Chen's research into the cultural impact of assimilation on Mexican-American families led them to assert that any social and economic benefit that might accrue to younger generations of Mexican Americans due to assimilation must be balanced against the possibility that such success comes with psychic costs associated with reduced social and emotional integration with older family members, as well as the Mexican culture as a whole, as often imbued by the older generation. However, Cisneros' stories, especially Never Marry a Mexican, speak more to Rosenfeld's theory that the fractious relationship between Mexicans and Americans breeds a schism within Mexican immigrants themselves, wherein they fail to locate a home within themselves, and so their physical home remains elusive. Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories presents a world of Mexican women stuck between cultures, but also stuck between conflicting ideas about themselves, their sexuality, and their purpose. Conclusion. The reader witnesses Cisneros' female characters as they realize the soul-deadening restrictions of familial and cultural expectations and struggle toward self-definition and control over their own destinies. Many of these women attempt to acquire self-definition and control through manipulating men, sexually or otherwise, somehow expecting that their happiness and personal fulfillment can be found from some form of exterior power not emanating from their own self-worth. As is clear from the Never Marry a Mexican analysis, Cisneros' women reflect the Mexican immigrants' struggle to assimilate the parts of themselves that negative cultural stereotypes have taught them to hate. This critical writing on Never Marry a Mexican was written and submitted by your fellow student. You are free to use it for research and reference purposes in order to write your own paper. However, you must cite it accordingly.